back. Did you miss me? I missed you. It's Watches Tonight. I'm your host, Tim Mosso. Tonight we are talking about a three-headed Rolex decision monster. We have an interactive feature, watches that make us exclaim, wow, and it's probably going to be our most interactive episode ever because of that one. Plus, we have a topic I think all of us can understand, which is the threshold of diminishing returns as a collector. All that and your wrist shots tonight on Watches Tonight. Jumping into the obvious, we promote the company that pays for these pixels, thewatchbox.com. The best place to buy, trade, or sell watches, especially when you want to sell. We pay cash, we pay fast, we make it a no-brainer, and we're global. Also remember, 24 hours a day, the advantages of the internet. Check me out. My own personal Instagram, Tim_Mosso. It is my other home on the World Wide Web where you can view short-form 60-second video reviews of some of the coolest watches I see on a daily basis. Help me hit 50K in 2K19. And finally, a little bit of you right here. Viewer wrist shots. This is your chance to shine. Russell K. leading off, always one of my luminaries. And in this case, that goes double. With his epic Longa Datograph Lumen, sharing time with my Instagram videos. That's our split-second Patek Philippe pocket watch minute repeater, Danny Gaufberg's own personal watch. Michael Chang and his IWC Portuguese chronograph surfing the web. And we have Louis P. with, well, let's be honest, that's the perfect watch. Zenith El Primero Chronomaster 410 triple calendar moon phase. It is a COSC certified machine with Fender, the perfect pairing. And P. Rao of Cleveland, Ohio. His Tudor Heritage Black Bay in the homeland of rock and roll, Cleveland rocks. Send your wrist shots to Monday mailbag at thewatchbox.com to see your analog on this digital. All right, jumping into a giveaway. I'm going to pay you for your time spent watching. We have a new raffle watch. It is the Panerai Luminor 3 days, PAM 523. A wonderfully wearable 42mm size. This one is an in-house caliber 9000, 3-day automatic, 100 meters water resistant display caseback, but you got to be in it to win it. Link in the description, whether you're watching live or recorded. Sign up because you have until midnight on Sunday, September 29th. I'm calling the winner on my show on Monday, September 30th. Jumping into the box, I can see we have all sorts of friends. Morrow, Kevin joining in from New York City. We've got Kenneth Mestrel from Wyoming, Randy Allen. We have Kaz joining in. We've got Richard Combs, an old friend from the Watch You Want days from South Florida. We've got Pilot Style 123, nice haircut, Tim. When do you set sail? My Navy days are over. And then right here we've got Robert Fletcher. We've got Dominique Jr., Slayer Rock Forever. And by the way, we've got Laurent Michel Carrier, we've got Robert Dixon of Scotland, and we've got Dave Opencar, Eddie Landsberg, a longtime fan and occasional studio audience. Welcome to everyone. Jason T. saying, Tim, I hope the vacation was great, just don't make it a habit. Guys, we had 2 consecutive weird occasions. A U.S. holiday, Labor Day, as we no longer have a labor movement in the United States. That one's purely ceremonial, but more substantively, our system broke down and we couldn't just go online. I mean, we literally could not stream. I was sitting here with this exact program in mind 2 weeks ago, and with 2 minutes to go, they're like, I'm like, really? They're like, bro? And they're like, bro. So that's how that happened. All right, jumping into the program for the night, we've got a question asked many times. I may as well answer for the assembled crowd. Bart G asks, Tim, I'm budgeted for a steel Rolex Daytona buy, and the last part of the process, the fun one, is making the choice. But I don't know which of the modern automatic Daytonas I should target, the Zenith model of the 1990s, the original 116520 steel bezel in-house caliber, or perhaps the latest ceramic bezel steel watch. And I know, Tim, that you'll probably recommend I buy something else for less money, but I'm confident in my choice. I'm budgeted for $24K, and I understand that I'm probably going to take a loss in the short term if the Fed ends. All right. Bart, you're 100% correct. I'm absolutely going to recommend you use the 24 grand or so to purchase a used Omega Moonwatch Moon Phase Aventurine full bracelet, 8 grand for this watch that once cost over 12. That's going to be the watch you wear every day. Your collectible watch for about 5 grand is going to be an actual 1990s Zenith Rainbow Flyback Pilot's watch, full bracelet, original tritium bezel, tritium dial, get it with the box and papers, and use the roughly 11 grand remaining plus maybe $1,400 saved to get on a wait list and enjoy those 2 watches while you wait to get the Rolex at retail and protect yourself. All of that said, yeah, I understand. Here's what you need to do if you must have that Cosmograph tout suite. Go for the Zenith watch. That's the one to buy right now. Although prices for the 16520, the 116520, and the 116500 are similar at face value, one of these things is not like the other. One of these things is not a bubble. Let's think about this. The original in-house Daytona, the 6-digit with the steel bezel, that's selling right now for $19,000 to $20,000. Because it ran from 2000 to 2015, there are a lot of them. So it's going to sell for less than the current ceramic bezel watch, even though technically this is discontinued. But they made a lot of them, remember. I would also mention that the ceramic watch trades for between $23,000 and $25,000. Just to recap, as we mentioned earlier, that's a $12,400 new watch retail. So if you buy it at twice list, I'm not saying you're going to give back all of that premium, but at some point the bubble will pop. Finally, the steel Zenith model from the 90s, the 5-digit, whether it's a black dial or a white, Patrizzi dial or otherwise, if you're not looking at one of the earliest watches like a floating Cosmograph, then you're looking at somewhere between $21,000 and $22,000. It's a fairly narrow band of trading rates. And that is the one to get. Save some cash versus the ceramic and get the scarcer watch, because the price of this one, unlike the other two, sort of represents true value. I expect to see the 2 newer Daytona's values decrease dramatically. Part of that will be due to macroeconomic factors that we really can't unpack right now. That'll be a discussion for maybe another time in another show. But equally relevant in the short term is buyer burnout. Collectors eventually move on from bubbles and fads. And when modern watches like the ceramic bezel watch or even the steel bezel 6-digit basically double in price in 18 months, yeah, that's a fad, and the end will come, probably sooner than later. All of which is to say, on fundamentals, the rarity of the Zenith watch and its historical claim as the first sapphire crystal, 100-meter water resistant, automatic winding, 40mm blanket COSC certified model, every version of it, means that it is both historically important and likely to stay somewhere around its current trading price. Certainly, you're not going to see it go any lower than $19,000, $20,000, even if we see a brief recession, and even if the bubble pops. All of which is to remind you that this is objectively a scarce watch, first and foremost. All historical landmarks aside, Zenith during the 1990s could make about 20,000 to 30,000 movements a year. That included the caliber 4030, the Rolex movement, which was made in its own special workshop at Zenith. That includes all the movements for Zenith's own watches. That includes all the movements that Zenith made for other brands at the time, like, for example, Concorde. And remember, in the 90s, Zenith's production was split between El Primeros, like the Rolex, and Elites, which were a substantial part of production. So you're talking about a very segmented portion of an already small body of watches that represents that Zenith Rolex Daytona. But really, just get the rainbow for $5,000 and thank me later. I mean, come on. How could you say no to a face like that? My God, that's easy. That's the right answer. That's the no wrong answer. Make it happen, Bart, please. Jumping into the box right here, I see we've got Portia Maven, we've got Rajiv M, we've got Jean-Claude Beaver saying, Tim, looking like it's 2009. In fact, 2009 was the year I joined the Navy. You guys are paying attention. And I could see we've got Hans joining in. Afternoon, Timothy. Afternoon, Hans. And JBO Surf joining in from Adelaide, Australia. Right here, we've got Monsignor asking, does satire belong in the YouTube watch community? Does it? Absolutely. And we've got a little bit of it on today's show. But then again, everything I do is in jest. We are talking about $50,000 man jewelry. How straight-faced can you play it? And I can see right here, we've got Loreno joining from Zurich, Switzerland, the largest city in Switzerland and the financial capital. Thank you for staying up late with me, my man, from Europe. Now, let me ask you, because this is going to be a very interactive feature, but what are your wow watches? Wow watches. I'll share mine as you guys load the cannon. First, some background. A wow watch is a watch that cuts through the cynicism, the burnout, and the fatigue that comes with constant buying, selling, trading, and oogling, or even just reading about a seemingly infinite array of watches in the hobby, in person, and, of course, in the pixel on the internet. The first time I thought about this concept was back in 2016 when Danny Govberg was about to buy Watch You Want, and he stopped by my workstation to see some of the watches that I was filming. Now, he looked at a 36mm Rolex Daytona Platinum with a well-chosen diamond and emerald sequencing on the dial, and he just sort of involuntarily exclaimed, "Wow, what a watch." And for perspective here, he was wearing, at the time, a rose gold Patek Philippe 5270R perpetual calendar chronograph, but that was the wow watch. So let me know in the chat if you're watching live, and in the comments if you're watching this recorded, which watches struck you so deeply and suddenly that you just exclaimed "wow" in awestruck, involuntary fashion. Let me know right here. I can see Russell996 is saying a wow watch, Patek Philippe 5370p. Russell, I think for you that's a dream that came true, isn't it? And I've got Victor B joining in from London, staying up late. We've got Zeitwerk. One word from Outlaw. And you know what? He's a man after my own heart. The Zeitwerk is one of my wow watches. We've got Trey joining in asking, Tim, what's your favorite alarm watch? And I can tell you without any hesitation, it's a tie between the Ulysse Nardin Sonata Cathedral, which is the ultimate and most sonorous chiming watch. I haven't seen the Patek Philippe 5520p yet, so I'm reserving my judgment, but for now, the most sonorous and beautiful and full-featured, because you could set it as a countdown or a count-up timer, it is the Sonata Cathedral. I'm also going to say the Ulysse Nardin Senator Diary, which is an alarm watch that you can set to a specific time, any one of the 24 hours of the day, 31 days in advance. So it is both a time of day and a calendar alarm, the ultimate reminder. So those are my two favorite. The Sonata for the brilliance of its countdown and the sweet dulcet tones of its minute repeater-like chiming system, which does include a governor and cathedral gongs, and then just the versatility and innovation of the Senator Diary. And I can see right here we've got Joseph T. He's a simple man, a Submariner no date is his wow watch. Back to Glasuta Original 41 Metz J saying, the Senator 60's green. You know that fume dial they make? I agree with you. That's an awesome piece, especially the Senator 60's chronograph, which is rarely seen with the green dial. We've got Pilot Style 123 saying, my wow moment was an AP perpetual calendar dress watch with the Tuscan dial. And I wish I could pull up a picture of that because that's a wonderful image. We've got Kaz O saying, the Japek Aqua Blue Guilloche. That's right, the Aqua Blue with a true rose lathe guilloche made by Metalem, the ultimate dial supplier in Geneva. These are great watches and great answers. We've got 1010 Talk saying the Ming Ultra Blue 1703, a limited edition. And we've got Dominique T saying Omega SMPC when I first saw it in the metal with Monsignor Rainbow Daytona. And that's a great answer and a watch we haven't featured on the channel yet. We've got Richard K, another fan of the Zeitwerk. And then right here, D. Fitzgerald, Zeitwerk love on this channel tonight. This is one hell of a show. You guys are all Zeitwerk fans. We need to have like a Zeitwerk rooting section at the next SIHH. And then right here we've got Tariq saying, what about the Panamatic Gray? And we've got Xavier N saying Platinum Daytona and Black Label Journe. All right, guys, great answers. We've got Tim Mosso, Tin Mosso, my Ferris soulmate, vintage Patek 96 with black dial and Breguet numerals. By the way, I look a little bit in that avatar like the guy from the In Rock We Trust album by Y&T. All right, JBO Surf 1850 Chrono Black Dial. Jumping back to the feature for a moment. So here are my personal highlights. My first ever wow watch. This one struck me before I was a collector when I was barely an enthusiast. Back in my senior year of high school, I was overwhelmed by how much I needed to learn about brands, about styles, about movements, about history. I had only the loosest notion of how a watch worked. Amid the flurry of unfamiliar terms and products, an Omega Seamaster stood out, or at least its dial did. This is the legendary electric blue chronometer reference 225580. It stopped me in my tracks at the Walt Whitman Tourneau. I saw it at the Roosevelt Field Tourneau too, but Walt Whitman was ground zero for the first encounter of a close kind and a blue kind. The Seamaster Electric Blue looked like a million dials, and it cut through the cases of Rolex, Breitling, and Tag Heuer like a 500,000 watt laser. And at $2,000 retail, it may as well have cost $1 million to a kid in a senior year of high school. I remember it vividly to this day, and it still excites me when it shows up pre-owned. A decade later, in 2010, I encountered my second wow watch that, wow, exclamation of awe and amazement and I can't believe this exists, but I'm happy to live in a world where it does watch. And I'd learned a new term by this point, Grail watch. The white gold limited edition JLC Duomet chronograph was my first Grail watch, and that's me back in Boca Raton in Meisner Park outside the JLC boutique. That's not where I got it, but it is where I got it serviced. And you can see 4 years later, it became mine, and I remember my hands shaking as I opened the box the first time I saw the watch. You know that feeling, you've been there. It's an incredible, almost like demonic possession that overcomes you. It runs up your spine, your hairs stand up, you feel chills. Later that year, 2014, I joined WatchYouWant.com. Watchbox was Watch You Want, and I officially became part of the watch industry, which meant many wow watches followed, but not as many as you'd think. There are only a few that truly stood out, starting with the Lange und Söhne Zeitwerk. We've mentioned it a couple of times on this show. By the way, that time display, that's the movement on the dial side of the watch. And what appears to be a screw next to the number 52 is actually a pivot jewel for the 2 minute discs. Now this thing is otherworldly. 42 millimeters, a digital wrist instrument. I don't know if I call it a watch. You watch it, but it's inspired by a 5-minute clock at an opera house in Dresden. And the timepiece is otherworldly compared to the Lange 1 or the Datograph, which are impressive, beautiful, but in many respects a little bit anachronistic. This thing is hyper-modern. Turn it over, it brings a tear to both eyes, as it features a caliber, the L0431, that has both a constant force remontoire d'égalité and, I should mention, a remarkable jumping system based on what they call a time bridge that starts with a pinwheel and ends with 2/3 wheels. It's a gorgeous thing, and the mainspring in this watch is so thick and heavy that as you wind it, you know, eyes closed, it's the Zeitwerk. And by the way, the mainspring on one side is fixed to the base plate because it is so thick and powerful, it needs to be anchored outside the barrel. There was also the MIH watch, engineered by Ludwig Oxlin, designed by Christian Gaffner, and built by Paul Gerber of Zurich. This is a watch that combines an annual calendar, 100-meter water resistance, 42-millimeter titanium case, and a chronograph, and it is a limited series, not limited edition, but limited production watch. We've had exactly one. Out of 25,000 watches we've owned and sold since I've been here, we've had one of these, and I kick myself for not buying it. It wasn't an expensive watch, it was just an incredible watch. And look at the design parallelism between the width of the indices, the width of the slot for the calendar, the width of the hands, the width of the crown, and the width of the lugs. All of that is symmetrical, right down to the MIH at 9 o'clock. Bet you didn't see that on the first pass. There is the Halter Barnes Antica, a watch that was otherworldly, like a UFO come down to Earth. Now, I'd seen pictures of this watch as the Vianney Halter Antica, but I had never actually encountered one, much less one of the first 6 pieces, which was named in hyphenated fashion after the designer Jeff Barnes and the watchmaker Vianney Halter. They had a falling out, and afterwards all of these were branded Vianney Halter. This was both one of the earliest and, in my opinion, one of the most beautiful, as it was obviously handmade and imperfect, but more beautiful for it. When you looked at the dials, they were white gold, hand engraved, and filled with lacquer. When you looked at each of the rivets, and there were dozens on the case and crown, they were hand sunk. And the whole thing, though it appears immense, I expected it to be like an Hublot. It was more like a 40-millimeter Rolex Daytona, wonderfully delicate, enchanting, mesmerizing, and magnetic. It was a hypnotic experience, and I will not use that watch or that word to describe any other watch. This thing is in a class by itself. Finally, the Resonance Type 3, literally the watch of my dreams. I had a dream before I ever saw this watch of a watch with almost no lugs, no crown, no bezel, just one dewdrop-like dial that extended to the edges of the case. The edges, by the way, unseen. Well, thank you for making my dream come true, Resonance. This was one of the wow watches that left me frozen in my tracks. I remember the first time I ever saw one of these in our safe, and I can't tell you that I can remember the first time I saw a car, the first time I heard a song, or the first time I tried on a watch, but this watch is right up there with Eat the Rich from Motorhead and the first Lamborghini Countach I ever saw as a kid. I remember where I was, when it was, how it happened, every detail. Lemmy, Lamborghini, and Resonance, thank you. All right, jumping into the box right now. Guys, let me hear your wow watches before we move on to the next segment. Horology Homie's asking Tim, favorite Zeitwerk? It's like neck and neck right now between the de Bethune DB28 Digital and the Zeitwerk, and I don't know which side my loyalty lies. They're both competing for my affections, but in the end, as with Highlander, there can really only be one. And right here I could see we've got JBO Surf saying I'm torn between watches and the Frankfurt Motor Show. I would be too, that's my style. Horology Homies saying his favorites, his wow watches, are the Lange 1, the Datograph, and the Zeitwerk, the big three from a Lange und Söhne of Saxony. And then I can see right here, we have bump. Quite a few guys. We have a lot of Zeitwerk fans. And then we have a question, what type of people wear the Zeitwerk? In the real world, I've only seen a few people wearing the Zeitwerk. I think Kevin Rose had one. I've worn one as a matter of convenience. And I actually know a very large man who plays in the NFL who wears a Zeitwerk. So that's your clientele. Me and a bunch of people who are basically at the top of their professions at the opposite ends of the spectrum. In other words, anyone can wear a Zeitwerk. And then I've got a Milgauss Z Blue in the box. Plus we have Joseph T. Blancpain, 50 Fathoms, Automatique. And we've got Joe R. with a very original answer, Perennially 5-minute repeater. We've got Domo, Milgauss Z Blue. And then right here we've got Moro with Bulgari Octo Finissimo Black Ceramic. All good stuff, guys. Keep them coming. If you're watching this recorded, let me know in the chat box below. I should also mention to you that there were some mega watches that were not wow watches to me. I was not into them. I have experienced what some would describe as the ultimate wristwatch, the Patek Philippe Grandmaster Chime 6300G. Now, this came out in 2017, and it's 47 millimeters, it's over $2 million, it's 20 complications, it has hinge lugs, and it rotates on its hinge lugs to reveal another complicated dial. It's got it all. Chiming calendars, alarms, second time zones, perpetual calendar, minute repeater, grand sonnerie, petite sonnerie, but you know what it didn't have? Any particular appeal to me. I wore it once, I took the picture, and I was done with it. I had no desire to own it. That said, the 36mm Patek Philippe 5016R still haunts my dreams. There you can see a picture of 2, maybe 3 of my favorite things. 36mm with a case handmade by case-making legend Jean-Pierre Hagman of Geneva. A black lacquer dial. A watch 36mm in diameter that is packed with a retrograde date, a perpetual calendar with aperture displays, a tourbillon, a chronometer certification, and a minute repeater. All of that, and it's the size of a conventional Datejust. And you know what? I'm not a rose gold guy, but in that size, with those proportions, it has good manners. I would rather own it over its white gold counterpart. Again, it still haunts my dreams. The Resonance was my dream watch, but that is the watch that I will only ever experience and own in my dreams. And what a machine, with only about 200 of those made over the course of 2+ decades, and not all of them in rose gold with the black dial. That is a serious grail watch. That's like a holy grail watch. We need a new term for this kind of timepiece. And I'll say along those lines, 2018's Piaget Altiplano Ultimate Concept, a watch so thin it doesn't seem possible. If you were to take a piece of Pez, you know Pez candy? It's about as thin as a piece of Pez, and yet it is a real working mechanical watch. There are maybe half a dozen in existence, including stress test copies that are being beaten to death for research purposes at Piaget. I wore one of the consumer grade prototypes, and that will stay with me until the day I die. An incredible watch made of cobalt. Finally, the watch that still wows me on a daily basis, it got one shout out in our box, but the Rolex Milgauss Z Blue. This one came out in 2014, and I still don't understand how there's a 2-year wait list for the Steel Daytona, but you can basically buy this watch on demand. It makes no sense for me, but I'm not going to argue the point. I can get the watch I want most from Rolex, and it takes me full circle, bringing my catalog of eye poppers back to an electric blue dial in a stainless steel case. So let me know, what are your transcendent wow watches? I'm going to jump right back to the chat box here. I've got Loreno saying Moser Pioneer Tourbillon, so the 42.8 millimeter swimmable Moser Pioneer sports watch with the tourbillon. I can see right here we've got a Patek Philippe 5004 from Dustin Van Patten. Serious grand complication, chops. And we have Abdul saying that is a beautiful Grail watch. And BS saying the 5320G perpetual calendar, the white gold perpetual calendar from 2017 with the Arabic numerals, they're not brigades, but the blackened Arabic numerals, the cream lacquer dial, and the syringe hands. That is B&S's Grail watch and his wow watch. And right here, Edward S. is saying, in an interview, Lemmy said once about Motorhead's image, if we moved into the house next door to your lawn, you would die, and I love that. You know what? If Motorhead moved in, first of all the classical lineup is dead, so it'll never happen. But if Motorhead moved in next door, I would lose my hearing with a smile on my face, because Motorhead volume is serious volume. And then right here, Horology Homie's a fan of the Patek Philippe 5370P. All great picks, an MEF Glasuta Original Panamatic Lunar, maybe someday. That is his wow watch and his Grail watch. Now let's move on to your wrist shots. Watches you have. Yesterday's Grail watches now realize Tim M, the other Tim M, sports his Tudor, continuing Tudor's strong run with his Heritage Black Bay Diver Assure, Abdul R, who's watching right now, and his Zin 356-2 Pilot's chronograph enjoy late summer sun at the beach in Egypt. Elsewhere in the Mediterranean, Adam S of Tel Aviv sports his and his father's Omega watches. Seamaster and Speedmaster. M. T-Bone out of Miami collects his new Royal Oak at the Ball Harbor Shops in sunny South Florida. He's got the new 3-day 15500. Wear it in great health. An excellent score. Send your wrist shots to mondaymailbag@thewatchbox.com to see your pieces on these pixels. Main topic tonight, the realm of diminishing returns. Earlier this year, a major collector and I discussed the Patek Philippe 5270P, and the conversation turned to second thoughts that he had about the purchase. He'd just picked up the watch. It's a hell of a watch. So I wanted to know, what could possibly go wrong? I found out. The model has been hailed, background, as the ultimate and the last of the 5270 perpetual calendar chronographs. This is a line dating back to the 1518 of the early 1940s, and it is one of the flagship lines, the perpetual calendar chronograph at Patek Philippe. And this is almost by unanimous decree and unanimous agreement. I mean, it's really, there is no argument against it. This is the ultimate 5270, and everyone loves it. I have not heard one ill word about this model. And yet he had regrets. After an exchange of thoughts on the watch, he just flat out expressed, I need to stay away from these $200,000 watches. The collector in question now had no issues with money. He was good for it, and then some. So really, what was on his mind? Well, what was not on his mind first? Great watch, no inherent issues with the watch. Everyone loves it. And he said he loved it and was satisfied with what he had on his wrist. It was more of an emotional issue that was creeping into his conscience. He was a committed collector. He walks the walk, he talks the talk, he eats, drinks, sleeps, lives watch collecting. And he's a prior Patek fan. The 5270P fit his collection theme. It wasn't the odd man out. Again, money not a problem, he budgets for this. And then it hit me. After a certain point, each of us as a collector reaches a threshold where spending more, adding more complexity, or expanding the collection begins to add less and less incremental joy to the experience and the hobby overall. This is the threshold of diminishing returns as a collector. You can't add forever at ever-increasing value or volume and expect to increase your enjoyment by the same margin. Think about it. Think about the first few watches you bought. The first few you add to your collection swell your enjoyment immensely. a few of mine in the past. There's the satisfaction of seeing them all together in one place. It's cool. I laid them out just to look at them. The sense that you now have options. You have watches for multiple outfits, any dress. You've got watches for water, office, casual, formal occasions, black tie. You've got vintage. Everything is covered, every base. And it's satisfying to feel like you've accomplished something, putting together that collection. Even years later, let's be honest, the first watches we buy, even if we've sold them, tend to be the best remembered watches. Initially, it's incredible, and after the first few editions, you began to plan long-term on the assumption that each new watch will add the same kind of thrill that accompanied those first few. Stockpiling begins. New watches began to add proportionally less enjoyment, not more. The natural inclination is to dream bigger, high horology, complications, and rarity. Sometimes even piece unique or vintage rarity. And going Rolex 6239 Paul Newman is rare. The early assumptions are clear. All of the following have been suggested to me by early phase collectors at certain points. To wit, a $10,000 watch is twice as nice as a $5,000 watch. An advanced collector needs a collection to match. As your tastes become more sophisticated, so should your collection. Complications are more fun than simple watches because of course they are. Mainstream brands are hopeless. I'm done with Tag, Breitling, Omega, even Rolex. I'm only going with high horology, big three, independence, and small volume. And collections rightly start simple, but inevitably they grow more sophisticated. If not in complexity, at least in theme. You go into vintage, you start going with commissioned watches. Perhaps you seek piece unique. But in general, the chronograph follows the date just, the perpetual calendar follows the chronograph, a minute repeater is the crowning glory, and any of the above by an acknowledged master independent is the creme de la creme. All of which is to say, it is the special relativity of our hobby. Follow me here. The faster we go, the more power is required for each incremental increase in our velocity, and eventually we approach infinite mass, and progress basically halts. That's truer than you might think, because as time slows as we approach the speed of light, we don't need watches. Now, at some point, we have too many watches. We're not wearing the watches we have. We're not appreciating each watch. Each one we appreciate less before moving on to the next one. It's almost like the cycle speeds up. It's an addiction, make no mistake. We start stressing more and more about each new edition because we're trying in vain to get back to the same feeling, the high, that we had at the start of our collection and the excitement of those first few pieces. Taken to its logical conclusion, this is how a dream watch, a grail watch, an apex watch, like a Patek Philippe 5270p, arrives and we feel no sense of fulfillment. It doesn't make us whole. If anything, it just accentuates the gap that grows. I found myself in this position last year with my JLC collection, so follow me. The collection was at 10 watches, not nearly as big as some collections, and nowhere near some of the 100-watch collections I've seen bandied out on social media. But I felt like my mono-brand theme to collect all of the landmarks of JLC, I felt like it was nearing its conclusion and almost complete. I wasn't wearing, I got to admit, about half the watches on a regular basis. There were some watches that never came out. I wasn't wondering why the joy of collecting had been replaced by a creeping sense of joyless obligation to just finish the thing. And that was my own lack of self-awareness. I needed to reflect and I didn't. But I really started to feel like it was just a chore. Man, I got like that one piece. It's got to be a minute repeater. I got to find one I like and then I got to buy it. And if it's too much money, I got to bite the bullet because I'm this close, right? About this time, late last year, late summer, early fall, I found the last watch on my roadmap. And it was a JLC Master Minute Repeater Boutique Edition. Platinum. Putatively 30 pieces made. Putatively. 15-day power reserve, German silver movement, torque meter assembly, outrageous volume and tonal quality. This is truly one of the finest minute repeaters ever made, and for bonus points, David Kondo designed it. So in a little way, it's almost like owning a piece of independent watchmaking cool. Expecting a flat refusal, after finding one, I placed an aggressively low offer to the seller who had the watch, and I was shocked when the answer came back in the affirmative. The ball was in my court. They matched my offer. It was a ton of money. regardless. But I was getting what I wanted, right? This was supposed to make the collection whole. This was the end of the rainbow. This was sort of, I caught the horizon. And a weekend of soul searching followed. I really pored over the options online, tried to find some alternative to talk myself out of this, tried to move the goalposts a little bit, but I realized this was the perfect watch and I'm not going to get a better price. I even used my industry connections to bring down the price a little bit more. But let's be honest, at the time, half my watches were not being worn. My collection theme had become, in all honesty, a chore. I was done with this. That single watch had the potential to cost more than any of my watches, maybe more than all of the watches, and offer less satisfaction than any one of them. I pulled the plug and I rebooted the whole collection. I started from scratch. I started from scratch with this Zin. You remember, someone noticed because for about 6 months when you Googled Tim Mosso, the suggested search followed up with Sells Collection. So I got a sense that someone identified with what I was doing, if only because they were struggling to understand the impulse in their own conscience and soul. And each of us does reach a point of diminishing returns as a collector. My next collection will be built on the lessons of the first. Keep it focused and compact. You don't need 10 or more watches. 5 might be enough if you really love them. Keep it wearable and full. If you've got a watch that doesn't get wrist time, sell it or replace it. More isn't always more, just more expensive. I didn't realize that until I was basically blowing a year's salary on a minute repeater. But I realized it in time, and I got there before my impulse did. Realize that rotating the collection is okay. It's okay to have things coming in and going out. In many regards, watches in and watches out is the only formula for finding what you really love. And don't be afraid to start over and feel that thrill again. Each of us reaches the point of diminishing returns as a collector. For some of us, the threshold begins as collections grow too large to wear routinely. Keep the collection compact. If that's you, there's a good chance those watches aren't getting wrist time, and you can't even name all of them. It's time to reboot, or at least pare down. For others, the joy of each new watch ebbs as we target ever grander prizes at escalating prices. Focus on a comfortable price range where you're going to get the most enjoyment for your money. Others will cease to enjoy the hobby as they overextend themselves financially. Spend only what you can afford to lose. Not what you can afford to spend, but what you can afford to lose. If the house burned down and they weren't insured, or if they all got stolen, or if you just busted them all because they get thrown out of your luggage on a plane ride, if you could lose all the money and withstand it, you're within your means. For a watch collection, it should not cause financial stress. And finally, there are those like myself who feel the thrill fading as rigidly focused collection themes run their course and we ignore a world of alternatives. People like myself who run into that problem of a theme controlling us rather than the other way around, we need to open our eyes and our minds to new directions and new possibilities. Any of these amount to a wake-up call that a collecting theme or collection itself needs a reboot. My next watch collection will be less deliberate, less expensive, more spontaneous, and likely more satisfying and rewarding for it. I'm going to try to invest more meaning in the hunt and the capture of future watches. Get more in touch with what I like rather than what I think I should like. And for those, ultimately, who still chase infinite mass, Audemars Piguet's solid platinum full bracelet Royal Oak Offshore Boutique Edition has your number. 430 grams with all links in place. Now let's jump into the box right here and see what you guys are saying. Okay, I see that we've got a lot of folks who are still talking about their wow watches, and then we've got Gary Smith saying, Tim, your story is not typical. Some of us have been collecting for 25 years. 10 watches is my sweet spot. And then I could see Kevin S. saying, I'm starting my collection with a $30 Casio. That's okay. Truth be told, my collection started with a G-Shock when I was in 10th grade. I'm in that boat. And I've got a couple of you saying that you sort of agree with where I'm coming from. Blue Shirt Buddha, well said, Tim. We got Thomas Burnett agreeing, and then we have John Doe saying, I was going to buy 20 watches from Watchbox, but Tim, you convinced me not to. I am first your advocate. Remember, I don't work on commission and I'm not in sales. I'd rather buy goodwill than sell you a watch. And then right here, Kevin S. says he has a philosophy of one in and one out, which is a good way of testing the waters without ever finding yourself overstocked with a collection. Bump, bump, bump. We've got Jim Branch saying, hey, Tim. Hey, Jim. Good to see you joining in. And then we've got Bear Clooney Watches saying, it's a great analysis and self-reflection of a watch collector's mind. I felt it genuinely. And then, Tim, you express your feelings and thoughts well. Thank you. I appreciate that. I try to connect with the collector, and honestly, if we're not both feeling the same feeling, I probably swung and missed. So then we've got WC saying the dynamic of the chase, the attainment, and the realization that less can be more. And that's a big deal. WC's got a point. A lot of times, learning about a watch you never knew about, something like the Vacheron Constantin Saltarello. Did you know Vacheron had a jump hour? Did you know it was powered by the ultra-thin JLC 920 Bausch? Did you know it was also a retrograde? That was an exciting discovery for me in past years, even though I wasn't immediately in the market for the watch. That was suddenly on my radar, and I went down the rabbit hole of learning about Vacheron jump hours and retrogrades, and learning about that watch was a huge thrill, even though I don't have it in my collection. When you find a watch that you've just discovered and you find yourself on an arc toward owning it, that is very satisfying, and hopefully the energy you've invested in the chase will make the final capture and the ownership experience more meaningful in a lasting sense to you. And then right here we've got Thomas Burnett on current events, asking, Tim, what do you think of the Oris Big Crown Pro Pilot X? Now, newsflash, there have been a few new watches in the last couple of days, two of which are trading heavily on the full bracelet sports watch theme. There was the Bell & Ross BR05, which is one of the Nautilike watches, so that is a Nautilike. Guess where that term came from? And Bell & Ross, yeah, you definitely earned that appellation. A little bit more original, 44 millimeters in titanium, is the Oris Pro Pilot X, a pilot's watch that is remarkably 100-meter water resistant, so you can actually swim with this pilot's watch, and with a 10-day power reserve, it uses the Oris open-worked caliber 115. It's really cool. I like it. Between $6,000 and $7,000, it's a lot of money for an Oris, but then again, you are getting probably IWC Portuguese or 7-day quality for about $5,000 less. You're getting something that is a technical peer to Omega for maybe $2,000 or $3,000 less. So I like the watch a lot. Ultimately, Oris offers value at any price point. I do think if you hold your fire, you'll get the watch for less pre-owned. There have also been stainless steel Vacheron Constantin Corne de Vache. The reference 5000 is now a regular production model, 38.5 millimeters in stainless steel. Previously, only the Hodinkey was available in stainless steel. And we've seen a couple of other watches from other brands, including a very cool Certina Grand Date that for about $850 is probably the closest thing you can get to Glasuta Original for under $1,000. And then jumping out right here, Mark S. asks, Tim, who do you hang out with most outside of the office from the Watchbox team? Previously, while he was still with the company, it was Mike Michaels. Mike was my boy. We went to Blue Oyster Cult concerts. We went out, we grabbed bourbon. Actually, we'd been to a couple of concerts. Kiss, Def Leppard, Blue Oyster Cult. He was very much into the brown spirits, and so was I. Whiskey, bourbon, and scotch, and he was a wealth of the kind of knowledge that I do not have, but aspire to have. A watchmaker's watchmaker. Mike Michaels is the kind of guy who would, just for fun, get a 19th century marine chronometer on a gimbal running, and then put the first entry in the logbook since the 19th century, serviced, October 2015. He was that kind of watchmaker, and I will miss him dearly. Of the folks still here, I probably spend more time with the video team talking about products and projects. So all those guys behind the camera, one of these days we will turn the camera around so you can see them, but they are fine folks, and I probably spend more time with them on a professional basis than anyone else. And of course, Shannon Beck, the head of our sales group who originally hired me back in 2014, I probably spend the most time with her, bar none. And then right here we've got Hans asking, Wild Turkey? I'm more of a Knob Creek or a Booker's type guy, although Wild Turkey is quite good. And no, I'm not going to drink the Pappy Van Winkle or the Pappy Van Winkle Kool-Aid. I don't buy the hype. And the hype is ebbing, by the way. I like micro-brand bourbons, Hudson Baby Bourbon, and some of our local Pennsylvania bourbons are also pretty good. And then right here, Kevin S. asking, what happened to Mike Michaels? Mike Michaels moved on to his next gig. I'm not at liberty to discuss. I'll let him declare that on his Instagram page. He has a massive social media following in his own right. But he is a guy we love, a guy who is still a friend, and hopefully will cross paths again. Right here, Kevin S. asking Cutty Sark, because there is no longer a portion of the proceeds paid to maintain the Cutty Sark clipper? No. A no on Cutty Sark. Back when it benefited the maintenance of the ship, yes on Cutty Sark. And then finally right here, we've got Bud Owens. Does the video crew ride bikes too? One of them, Garrett, does commute by bikes, but as yet I have no fellow paceliners in the group. If you're in the Philadelphia area, join me for the Saturday Velo Vino ride. It's two-wheeled warfare at 9 a.m. on Saturday mornings. And then right here, we've got Bruce Willis. Tim, I loved the JLC and Panerai, so I bought the fusion of the two, the Panerai Radiomir 8 days, PAM 190 in steel. It has the JLC movement and easy to wear the Panerai wire lug Radiomir case. Perfect union and must be super cool because Sean Connery wears one. An unsponsored use by James Bond himself. You gotta love that. And by the way, if you want the ultimate version of that watch, the PAM 198, 50 pieces in platinum, that is a very cool JLC-powered Panerai Radiomir. And then right here, I've got a Maker's Mark fan from Turkey Vulture, and Ryan D saying he's a rum kind of guy. Well, let us know. What rum do you prefer? Let me know, Ryan. And then right here, we have Hans saying, say it ain't so. What, that I love Booker's or that Mike is gone? And then right here, Rick Green saying, I spend my bourbon money on watches. Here's how it generally works for me. I spend a certain amount of money on bourbon, I imbibe of which I purchase, and then I spend on watches. It's a vicious cycle, but it's an easy one, especially when Chrono24 and thewatchbox.com are only a click away. And then right here, we've got Bud Owens, a fan of Dalmore, and a fan of Scotch over bourbon anyway. Guys, thank you so much for joining me. We had one hell of a show. I think this thing has come full circle from one obsession to the next and back to watches. Thank you for everyone who participated in the comeback show. Thanks to you, thanks to my crew. It's great to be back. Remember, subscribe, comment in the box. If you're watching this recorded, join me at Tim_Mosso on Instagram and click the link in the description to win that Panerai Luminor. Time out, Tim out, and thanks for logging on.